Okay, well, first of all, let me preface this video by saying that don't mind the weird appearance of the editor. I'm running a few mods and add-ons. They're not going to be relevant. This is purely graphical. One such modification I made changes the aspect ratio of the game to 16:9, which is widescreen from 4:3, but the game was designed for 4:3, and that causes these weird graphical anomalies. I'm going to have a bit of an intro sequence. If you want to skip to the tutorial proper, I'll put an annotation in the video, and you can just click that, and the tutorial. Browsing around YouTube out of curiosity and try to see if there are any proper tutorials for how to use an editor, proper tutorials that includes everything from beginner to intermediate to advanced methods of how it operates. And I really didn't find many satisfying tutorials, and I was hoping to be the provider of content that could satisfy that. There is still surprisingly an audience for a game this old, and the editor is a really strong component. I've been playing this game since I was at least 7 years old. I have about 11 years of experience with this game, minimum. And I've studied the game inside and out, and I mean inside. I've opened all the little files, all the DTA binary files, the PPO files, whatever. The only thing I haven't cracked is the EXE. And what this tutorial will do right now is just showcase the basics of the editor. I'll explain everything, as it comes. And, yeah, this is going to be, this particular video is strictly beginner stuff, like how to use the interface and how everything works. Of course, the stuff I'm covering here is generally applicable to future ArmA games as well. In case you're confused, Operation Flashpoint is considered the original ArmA game. It's been renamed ArmA Cold War Assault. It's technically the first game of the series. And it's a bit confusing because the first ArmA game that came out was in 2006 called Armed Assault, just Armed Assault. And, there was a lot of conflict between Codemasters, which was the publisher of this game, and Bohemia Interactive, which was the developer. And Codemasters kept the name and created future Operation Flashpoint games, which were crap. And Bohemia Interactive created ArmA, which is basically this game just with a different name and engine updates. So all ArmA games function like this, and recently Codemasters finally gave up the original game's rights to Bohemia, and they scooped it up and renamed it ArmA Cold War Assault. I'm still running it as Operation Flashpoint purely for nostalgia reasons. Yeah. Also, how to access the editor. It's straightforward. It's right here in the main menu, and you get this little laptop that pops up, and you get to select an island. Desert Island is the island you see in the background right now. This will load by default, so you can just click OK and open it up. You might be wondering what the mission wizard is. Don't use this, but I'll click on it just to show you what it is. Essentially, it opens a template for you to use, and it lets you just really quickly set up the basic components of a mission based on the template, and then it creates something that you can play. It gives you a mission type, you give the mission name. There's only one template available to me right now. And so, yeah, right here, you get to customize things like your insertion point, enemy patrols, patrol destinations, blah blah blah, doesn't matter what map you're on. You click finish, and then the mission begins. You get a pre-made briefing, you have a small squad, and you start. There's very little control offered to you here, and I don't recommend making missions this way, especially since for the most part, once you get other templates, it's the only type of mission you can make. It's always exactly the same, aside from the different locations you can change. You click the button, Desert Island, and you have this tab up here, Advanced or Easy. You might have it defaulted to Easy. Turn it on to Advanced. There's no reason to have Easy unless you have a crippling fear of large menus. Look. You have side, class, unit, control, skill, health, armor, fuel, ammunition, azimuth, blah blah blah, all these options. That's what you have on Easy. On Advanced, you have those same options, and then some more options. There's no reason to use Easy. So I'm making this tutorial under the assumption that you have never ever seen this screen before. So I'm going to teach you all the basics, like how do you move around, what are you doing here. So to navigate the map, you right click and drag to pan it. You scroll up to zoom out and scroll down to zoom back in. You can click on any entity to select it, click somewhere else to deselect it. You can left click and drag to have a drag box. You can hold shift and move the mouse to rotate your entity. You can double click to edit the entity's properties. You can double click somewhere to create a new entity. You can copy the entity, Control C, Control V. or you can use Control-Shift-V to paste in the original location of the entity. Look right here. Yeah. Next up is this button right here, and yes, this is a button. It's called the Intel screen. By clicking on it, you have this little briefing section. Don't let that fool you, it doesn't actually make a briefing. The name is the mission's name as it will appear if you save the single missions or if other people are playing it. It's what comes up on the notepad. The description is only helpful for multiplayer. All that it does is just have a description. And if you're in multiplayer, people will see the description, but otherwise, it doesn't appear anywhere in-game. The primary use that I use this for is to give a description to a mission, so if I ever forget what it is, I just open this box and look. The date is self-explanatory, the time is self-explanatory. This is on the 24-hour clock, by the way. This is the weather. I think it's obvious. This right here means thunder and lightning and rain and whatnot. This is really sunny. This is fog, in case, because there's no distinction here. The higher the slider, the more fog there will be. This is the forecast. It's functionally identical to weather, only the engine will change the weather until it matches the forecast. It takes 30 minutes. There are other ways to manipulate the weather, but they involve scripting and are past the scope of this tutorial in particular. And the resistance is friendly too. This should be obvious. If you place down a resistance unit, if it's to the west, then they'll be friendly to the west. If you pick east, they'll be friendly to the east. If you pick everybody, they'll have no enemies, and nobody, they will hate everyone. Okay, so what are these tabs on top? Those are the editing modes, and you can cycle between them by using the function keys. I'll explain these in more detail as the tutorial goes on, except synchronization, because that one's a bit more complicated. These are pretty much all critical for making good missions. The tabs on the right, on the other hand, are just basic stuff. You know, like you can load missions, you can save missions, you can clear the map so you can start a new one, but it doesn't change any of the intel info. An interesting one is merge. Basically, what this does is it merges this mission with some other mission that you have. You know, like it copies all the units, the triggers, and everything over. Like it just basically merges it. And this is really useful if you want to make this one big mission, but you want to design it in parts. And then at the end, you just merge it all together. Show IDs shows object IDs. There are no objects on this particular map, but things like pre-placed buildings, street lamps, bushes, they all have an associated ID. The textures just show the textures. Preview previews your mission. And if you were to abort, continues where you left off on your last preview. This is a particularly interesting option because it lets you choose between the mission, intro, and outros. The intro is a cutscene. If you place down a unit, you cannot control him. The AI takes over. Even in first person, he has the AI casual standing animation. And you either have to end this through a trigger, or you can just hit escape or spacebar just like you can skip cutscenes in the regular game. Mission is the mission itself. This is what we in particular will worry about. And the outro is the same as the intro, only if you have a victorious ending, you'll get outro win. Like if you pick, I'll explain how the endings work later on. And if you lose, you get outro lose. They misspelled lose. Basically, the progression is straightforward. Intro, mission, and one of the outros based on what endings you have defined in the mission. You don't need anything except the mission to make a good mission, or just a mission in general. You can completely ignore the other tabs, but they can look nice if you have a good cutscene. And if you like, you can also just make a pure cutscene mission without any gameplay. In that case, you design everything in the intro tab and ignore the mission. And when you're done with the cutscene, the mission will end, and if you're making, say, a campaign, it'll move on to the next mission, or if it's a single mission, it'll just play the cutscene and then end. Now I'm going to explain how the Units tab works. You double-click somewhere to place a unit, and you have all these options. The side is the side the unit's on. That should be self-explanatory. You have West, East, Resistance, Civilian, Game Logic, and Empty. Game Logic is a bit more complicated. That will be explained separately. And Empty is just miscellaneous stuff, you know, like empty vehicles, objects like sandbags, things like that. That's all under that category. And the class is the class of units. So in the case of West, East, and Resistance, you have Men, Air, Armored. Ignore these are add-ons. Yeah, so like Armored, you'd have tanks to work with. Men, you'd have soldiers to work with, things like that. The control is self-explanatory. It's non-playable. You're the player. or if you have a multiplayer match, it's playable. The info age is how many units know about it. Unknown means nobody knows about it until they see it. Actual means they know it as it is. And all these times indicate that, oh, we knew its position this many hours ago. So mainly this is just how the AI behaves. The lock is a lock for vehicles, so if it's unlocked you can get in, if it's locked you can't. The default is whatever the vehicle is set to. The rank is straightforward, it determines who leads a group. The individual unit, we just looked at that already. And special. If you place units down and they're grouped together, information makes them stand in formation. So if the default formation is a wedge and you group the units together, all the units will spawn in that wedge where they're supposed to be. Flying means that if a unit can fly, it'll spawn in the air. In cargo means that if the units are grouped to a vehicle with cargo space, they'll be in there. And none means they'll just be placed as is on the editor screen. Name is for scripts. This is for variables. You can't type in any numbers like 1, 2, 3. That won't work. You have to start it off with some sort of letter, like A. That works. The skill is the skill of the unit. Lower the skill to the left, it'll suck. Skill to the right, it won't suck. Initialization is some sort of scripting command, so ignore that. Health and armor is health and armor. Fuel and ammunition is fuel and ammunition. Azimuth is the rotation. Probability of presence is interesting. If this is anything other than 100%, the game will roll the dice, and if it's successful, the unit will spawn. If not, it won't be present. So you have a 50% chance of spawning every time you start the mission. He has a 1 in 2 chance of being there. The condition of presence is scripting related, but basically it also changes the conditions that it's present in. Like maybe you want this guy to appear only if you're not playing on easy. And the placement radius is the radius in which the unit could spawn. So if you put a radius of say 50, it can spawn anywhere within 50 meters of the place that you put it in. And if I actually type one in, like so, you see this little radius, and that's where it could spawn. If I disconnect the unit from me for a second, okay. And I preview the mission, he's over there, I abort, start again, he's still there, goddammit. Now he's closer, now he's over there. I'm just making groups. So if you hit F2, or click on this tab up here, you can double click and spawn a group, which are pre-made sections of units. Everything is pre-made, like the individual units are selected, their formation is made, you know, the ranks are already put up. It's a pre-made set of units for convenience, and you can adjust them, like their rotation here and so on, and you hit OK to spawn it. You can manipulate all these units individually or as a group by clicking and dragging, and it functions otherwise completely the same, except that if you try to rotate more than one unit at a time, they all rotate around a common bury center. So if I move these units out, and select them all, and try to rotate, they'll pivot around a central point between all of them. Now the way the grouping works is, if you're in group mode, you can't individually manipulate units. You can only manipulate their groups. And the blue lines represent their grouping to something. If there's no blue line, they're not grouped with anything. So you can click and drag to join something to a group. The way it usually works is, if you have several units of the same group, of the same rank, placed down, disconnect them, grouping a unit to a unit will make it the leader. The only way you can change that otherwise is by ungrouping and regrouping, or increasing the rank of the unit.